Good evening. I'm Frank Kaufmann, the president of the Settlement Project. This is part two of the podcast I intended to create for today, January 20th, 2021. It's the day that President Trump left office, gave a speech in the morning at Andrews Joint Air Force Base, and flew home to his new residence in Florida on Air Force One. Shortly thereafter, the next administration was sworn in, and so America faces what is very seems very sure to be a very different 4 years than the ones that we've just lived through together with the president and much of his family serving the American nation and trying to create for it a certain culture and tenor. The I don't know much about the inauguration ceremonies. I quickly looked over the written text of the speech. It troubling set of content, but that's all right. Um, the what I wanted to do today, especially today, and why I'm speaking so late tonight is to stick with wanting to report an inspiration of what I want to say to the community, which, if you've listened to part one of this podcast, I'm calling the MAGA community. I'm trying to distinguish the 75 million plus Americans who voted for President Trump to have a second term. I I don't want that group anymore to be identified as Trump supporters. These are 75 million patriotic Americans who've lived a long life before the Trump presidency. They'll live a long life after the Trump presidency. They've forged their lifestyle and their values and their views on America for years before and will continue to work for these ideals for years afterward. All of us were very grateful for Mr. Trump, who was willing to withstand a tremendous amount of offense and opprobrium and incessant denigration of his person and his family, his administration, and his efforts. So we are, by every definition, Trump supporters, but I'm trying to create a new concept or a new word for these 75 million American patriots so that the left doesn't have its easy, facile, and grotesquely errant notion that these are people who are just attached to the personality of a particular individual. An egregious and demeaning and ignorant assessment of a population that large. So this, what I'll call for now until I come up with a better or hear from my listeners a better term, I'm going to call this the MAGA community. It's more than half of eligible voters. They voted clean and clear. They didn't alter established legislative regulations for how votes would be cast. It's an enormous accomplishment to have a vote count of that magnitude. So this community, the MAGA community, people who are committed to the ideals of patriotism, to gratitude for our country, its founding, its structures, its ideals, and our efforts to improve day by day, to get better in the pursuit of what America is meant to be, a country of God-given individual freedoms, a country of equal justice under the law, a country that's fair and honest and true and hardworking, whose doors are open for all who are weary and downtrodden. So this is what I call the MAGA community, and I want to offer three or four thoughts on a day that otherwise might be despairing. I don't think the MAGA community has time for that, and possibly not even inclined that way. So here are the things I recommend. One, guard ourselves, or guard yourself against being gaslit. Do not be convinced that your decisions and that your commitments and that your allegiance and that your appreciation and gratitude for the efforts of President Trump or for the achievements of President Trump were wrong or misguided or in any way represent failure to understand the reality. Also, if you happen to believe that the election was altered by fraud, do not do not allow yourself to be convinced otherwise unless there is good solid evidence to the contrary. All evidence suggests otherwise. So the first thing I'm asking of the MAGA community is not to allow what you were clear about erode or be altered or to be diminished or to begin to doubt ourselves or doubt yourself. Guard against that. In keeping with that, I pray and I'm asking that this community remain cohesive, remain intensely devoted. Do not let disappointment, do not let the radical dismantling of the achievements of the last 4 years dampen your willingness to fight in a patriotic manner for the ideals that we believe America represents. Stay strong, stay true, stay united, keep solidarity with one another, keep a vigorous and fiery spirit for the good that we've always tried to represent. The second thing I would like all of us to do is to look closely at the vulnerabilities that allowed the outcome that we had to live through today. How did it come to pass that this inauguration happened contrary to what 75 million plus voters in America hoped to see? There were a number of things that happened. One of the big things that happened was that the conservatives or MAGA family was beat on the local scene. It was beat by state legislators. It was beat by secretaries of state. It was beat by local judiciary, by elected judges, and so on and so forth. On the ground, the left waged, of course, it was full of fraud, illegality, and unconstitutional achievements by the left, but they did it and they won. They did it and they won. So the conservative America was asleep at the wheel while the left beat them on the ground, while the left changed laws, while legislators changed laws, while liberal judges voted or blocked the hearing of evidence on the vote, and so on and so forth. If anything the MAGA community has to do in the next 4 years, one of them is to pay close attention to local politics, extremely local politics, not only at the state level, but at municipal level, and even more, and even in counties and municipalities. This is really important. The second thing that needs to be done, this should be a wake up call. What we had to sit through today should be a wake up call, and the vulnerabilities have to be observed and tended to. The right needs to grow to understand politics locally and know where the fight is fought. We were the conservative Americans were defeated. Were not defeated at the ballot box, but were defeated by the manipulation of local political behavior. That has to be conservative Americans and patriotic Americans have to plant themselves as a bulwark against that kind of behavior on the local level. The other thing is the conservative patriotic American movements, call it the MAGA movement or the MAGA family, were asleep at the wheel while your children, while our children, and while those who came to control corporate America were indoctrinated by Marxist infiltration of all matters of information transfer, especially in education. In education at primary level, education at secondary level, education at higher level. The education system has been fully infiltrated, and that happened right under the noses of patriotic Americans. This is the second place where these 75 million people better wake up, better get to work, and better start to put the brakes on and prevent the further indoctrination of students who are going to school with innocent and sincere efforts to improve themselves and to gain an education. The other thing that happened was, and again, asleep at the wheel. Again, this is happening right under the noses of the conservative MAGA community. Is that media came under complete control of Marxist infiltrated left and came under complete control of an enemy of the United States, the Communist Party, Communist Chinese Communist Party. They came to own Hollywood, came to own all the major communicators of news information in the United States, and came to control the corporate boards of major tech through which information and communication is transmitted. What the conservative constitutional conservatives need to work on, in addition to setting ourselves up on local political legislators and judgeships and secretary of state, mayors, local city council people, etc. The next thing, in addition to being positioned politically, is to begin a serious and concerted effort to invest in and pay close attention to the ideological developments that are being implanted in the schools, in the churches, in the military, in the corporate boards. Finally, the thing that happened to Parler is an especially poignant and especially beautiful wake up call for the MAGA community, because we saw that from A to Z there was a concerted and collaborative conspiracy to victimize a single platform that was abiding by Section 230, the only one. Twitter and Facebook were in violation of Section 230 because they were behaving as publishers, and they were deliberately censoring news and influencing the election. Parler maintained its commitment to be an open source of information where people could communicate freely, and as the only of the public communications platforms, was closed down. How was it closed down? Apple Apple blocked its app from being downloaded, but you would think at least it would have a website. No, it didn't have a website. AWS, Amazon removed the capacity, removed Parler off of its web services, thus crippling it. It may come back, but this is the wake-up call, which should tell conservatives that the conservative community needs to build ironclad, titanium-bound communications thoroughfares that cannot be closed down under any circumstances. This is extremely important. You may have the truth, you may have better media, you may have instruments like Signal, the Epoch Times, since serious journalistic efforts to communicate the truth, and they're both on the left and the right. Glenn Greenwald, as a purely left-writing figure, writes the truth. But what the conservative community has to make sure of is that the conduits for the communication of information be in our own hands, that cannot be violated in tyrannical, oppressive, and repressive fashion, the likes of which happened to Parler. So work on the ground politically, set up our own hardware, literally our own hardware, so that it's impervious and protected against tyrannical repression, censorship, and the violation of America's God-given rights. The conservative community has to remain confident in its ideological position and in its journalistic traditions. The final thing is, not final, the second to last thing is, I pray and urge and request that the community of conservative Americans, the MAGA community, the 75 million, that we love each other, respect each other, protect each other, uphold each other, uplift each other. We don't need to find our next great leader. We just need to find, is our neighbor fair and square? What does he or she want to do? And how can I help? We let us become an integrated whole of every last person. Whether maybe it is a great leader, maybe we do see a great leader on the pike. I know a handful of them I love to death, that I would support for any office in the land, including president. I'm for them. But I'm not looking for a leader. I'm looking for who's going to be a writer, who's going to be a newscaster, who's going to be a weather person, who's going to be a high school teacher. Let every one, last one of us, every single of the 75 million and all of our extended families, not only the ones who vote, but all of us and our children and our young children, our teenage children, let us turn to one another, support one another, protect one another, uphold one another. Do not fracture in minor vicissitudes of ideological difference. Come together, get strong, and get wise. This is what I pray we do. The last and final thing I want to communicate in this part two of my January 20 podcast is ponder, step back, gather yourselves, step back, sit alone, ponder who and what I am. Am I a truck driver? Am I a railroad man? Am I a small business owner? Am I a professor? Am I a writer? Am I a thinker? Am I a musician? Am I a dancer? Look to see who and what I am, and with all the vigor in my heart, give of that thing to a beautiful nation, to a nation where that is colorblind, where all races are one in the eyes of God, to a nation where everybody has the right to speak, to a nation where we love one another, the types of love and embrace and interracial and beauty that obtained in the Trump rallies with tens and hundreds of thousands of people. Find out who and what I myself am, and keep giving with all of our power, all of our heart, all of our joy, all of our confidence. The mere presence of a hostile administration, no matter what it can do, cannot stop me from living as an American patriot. So I hope these small encouragements are helpful for the day. This is a day of regrouping, redetermining, of taking stock, of looking where I was duped. It's like walking away from the three-card Monte table. It's like walking away from the three-card Monte table. We were taken, we were had, we were duped. But I'm not going to go get duped again. I want to know what happened, and I want to protect every one of my brothers and sisters from this ever happening again. That's us. That's what we're starting now, and let's do that together with the same excitement, same happiness. We're grateful for our president and his family, and we're grateful for what he and they started, together with all the tremendous people who supported them, the McEnanys, the Nuneses, uh, the the Lees, and on and on. We're still one. We're still here. We're still a massive majority, and have not even begun to have the impact that we are yet to have. Thanks a lot for listening. Look forward to be with all of us again soon.